Let's keep going. Still talking about ethnic violence. A couple other areas. You might not recognize this out of context, but this island here is Sri Lanka. It used to be called Ceylon under the British Empire, but Sri Lanka is the name of this place. Now, Sri Lanka is that island just off the coast, the east coast of the bottom tip of India. So Sri Lanka is mostly Buddhist, and most of the people speak the Sinhalese language. Let me see if I can see on this map over here. So Sinhalese language is going to be on this map it's going to be the dark red here, these right here, the dark red and the orange. So you can see that most people in this sort of area here, it's mostly that group of people. 17%, especially in the Northeast, this area here, this green area, are Hindu, and they speak the Tamil language. Now, here's the deal. So back in the British Empire, the British wanted to grow tea, and they wanted to grow tea on this island. So they started growing tea on this island. They built these sort of tea plantations, and then they couldn't really get the locals to help with the tea very much. So what they did is they essentially brought workers in from India. So they brought workers in from India. It wasn't slave labor. It was more like looking for a job, come on, get a job. And they built these tea plantations, particularly in this area here. So, okay, so the Tamil people were from the mainland India, Hindu, came over here and were working those plantations. And then obviously they lived there, they had generations, the next generation. Decolonization happens. Sri Lanka becomes its own state. And now the majority people here are saying, you guys, you're just migrant workers and you need to go back to India. And they're saying, whoa, I've been here, my grandma's been here, my great-grandpa's been here. Yeah, they came over as a migrant worker, but I'm not a migrant worker, I live here. And so but this group still says, no, you got to go. The Sri Lanka for Sri Lankans, I guess you could say. And the Tamils say, nope, we're going to stay. And a big civil war kicks off. In the 1980s, the government tries to deport these plantation Tamils. And the Tamils say, screw you guys. And a civil war kicks off in which it is messy on both sides. If you ever read sort of the human rights record of this, it is not a pretty picture. The Tamil Tigers is the civil war. It's part civil war, part guerrilla warfare, part terrorism. And that's the thing, is where the line between freedom fighter and terrorist sort of is. The Tamils would have said, we're fighting for our freedom. The Sinhalese would have said, no, they're terrorists. And 64,000 people killed in this. There's suicide bombing. It is a really messy thing. It only really ends about 10 or 12 years ago when this group here, the Sinhalese, finally defeat the Tamil Tigers and basically say, if you're going to stick around, you're going to play by our rules, period. Anybody who doesn't mess with that. And a lot of human rights records after the war in terms of just trying to pacify the population. You're going to watch a video about this here in a little bit, about how even though the sort of civil war is over, doesn't mean that problems have been solved. Another area is what we call northeastern India. So if you look on the map and you see India, and India, when we think of India, we think of like the Deccan Plateau and sort of that main area where the Ganges River is. And then over here on the east side, there's Bangladesh. But if you look above and to the northeast of Bangladesh, there's this big chunk of India up there. It's connected by this sort of thin area right here. And that's all India up there. And this is a fairly mountainous area. So if we see a mountainous area, we're not surprised to find a bunch of different ethnicities that were able to sort of retain their culture, their independence, their language, and things like that, despite the fact that it's part of India. India, of course, is trying to make sure that Hindus move into this area so that it retains its Indianness. I know that's super weird for me to say, but just to give you an example, like, for example, Nagaland. Nagaland's been having a sort of varying civil war / terrorist organization since at least 1956 to try and retain their either retain their autonomy, sort of, you guys leave us alone, we'll be a part of India, but leave us alone, or even trying to break away and become its own state called Nagaland. Um, Assam. Assam, so as Indians sort of start to move into this area, more and more Hindu people are coming to this area. So the Assam fight back. And they fight back and they say, look, we're Assam people. We don't, we want to retain who we are. And so they say, we don't want any more Hindus coming in here. And they sort of fight conflicts over this. The Hindus just keep coming in though, and essentially they take over the area for the most part. And you're going to see a video here in just a second talking about the citizenship issues with that. The main thing I want you to get here is not that you walk away and say, I now understand area ethnic conflict in South Asia, but I do want you to understand the messiness of it, the history of it, that these things don't just sort of pop up. They have long histories, and they're not simply solved. You can't just say, why doesn't everyone just get along? It's not quite that easy. All right, so I'm going to have you watch two videos now. One about Sri Lanka, sort of what's going on in Sri Lanka right now. The second one, I want to be clear about this. You're only going to watch the first 4 minutes. It's like a 25-minute video. I only want you to watch the first 4 minutes because the rest of it's just sort of a panel discussing this. And I'm not that interested in that. I just want you to see sort of some of the processes that go on to try and say this land is our land and it's not your land, and I can do that by saying you're not a citizen. So take a look at that. We'll come back for one more thing and then we'll be done.